Hey, noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. So good to have you here today. So as you know, this is a little bit of an eclectic channel. Sure, I do history, I do civilization, the occasional video on languages and linguistics and video games. But in general, I've also got quite a few videos on the Bible, literal interpretation of the Bible, the idea of angels, demons, Adam and Eve, but all from the context of cultural and, of course, the interpretation of the original texts. And then, clearly, I've got videos on the history of religion, the church in the medieval period, and Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, if we go to my channel, look at this 1,000 videos. Hey, that's a milestone right there. If we click on playlists, I've got a dedicated playlist called Biblical Interpretation and History of Religion with, at the moment, 14 videos, but 15, because I'll include this one, of course. Now, as you know, the Shroud of Turin is, of course, one of those topics that I always found extremely interesting, and I've got a few videos of my own. I've recently posted one, in fact. But today we're going to see an AI recreation of the face of Jesus, in theory, a more realistic face of Jesus, based on the Shroud. Now, clearly, if you think that the Shroud is a fake or a hoax, then any face you would recreate using AI would not be indeed the face of Jesus. And even more so, if you're one of those that believes that Jesus did not exist at all and there's no historical proof for Jesus to exist, then this is even more of a useless exercise in your opinion. I will respect your opinion, although of course I disagree, and I do believe, as most historians do, that Jesus was indeed a real historical character. I am, however, curious to see what the AI is doing with the Shroud, so let's jump into it. Alright, so we got a few videos. Let's start with this one. Let's see what we have got. Headphones. Woohoo!
Recently, AI technology has been used to generate images based on the Shroud of Turin.
Well, the AI technology has been used to create this voice, I believe. Oh, goodness gracious, it's like a multi-level thing. AI telling us about how AI...
A linen cloth believed by some to have wrapped the body of Jesus Christ. This AI-generated image aims to provide a visual representation of what Jesus might have looked like, based on the faint imprints left on the shroud.
Okay, so first and foremost, I do have to say this is a absolutely beautiful image. Okay, well, whether we want to agree with it, disagree with it, discuss, let's start from the fact that this is a wonderful image, absolutely beautiful. Does it match, though, the sort of imprint that you have on the shroud? Well, I'm sure they're going to show us one next to the other, maybe overlaying it on top, a little bit of a juxtaposition. Let's see if they do that, because I'm not quite sure. Maybe the nose.
This development highlights the incredible advancements in technology and its potential to enhance our understanding of historical and religious artifacts.
Well, you know, when it comes to AI and its potential to enhance our understanding of history and, artifacts and whatnot, well, I have a few things to say about that. Well, you know what? I already have on this video. Link in the description below.
What are your thoughts on using AI to explore and recreate historical images?
Okay, that was it. Great. Okay, no overlapping and nothing. Okay, that was not a good video. Close it. Next. All right, titled, Colorized and 3D Images of Face of Jesus AI Generated from Shroud of Turin.
The evidence for Jesus keeps piling up. The Shroud of Turin has been confirmed to line up with the dates perfect of Jesus' death.
Not exactly a confirmation. It's more probable that it did, but we don't know. It's not 100% confirmed. Let's be honest about this.
AI was used to look at the cloth and
Right.
extracted an image of a face from the cloth. Here is the original shroud superimposed against the latest AI image of Jesus' face.
Okay, so I imagine they're gonna show us. If they don't do it, I'll put one next to the other, because I think putting it on top, overlaying, can be good up to a certain extent, but I think it would be nicer to have them left and right, so we can do spot the difference type of thing, type of game. So, because so far, I'm not sure. Yeah, the nose is matching. Not sure about the eyes and the hair. Facially, yeah. The mustache seems taller on the image.
Now
but
watch as we transform, for the first ever time, this AI image of Jesus' real face into color. This is true.
That is sepia. Oh, they still has to do it. Sorry. Pedantic me. I apologize. Pedantic me. Okay. Well, here it's, once again, wonderful image. It's a beautiful image. He does look a little pale for someone who was working outside. Maybe a little tan. I would give him a little tan, but yeah. When it comes to the beard, I think it is very probable that he would have a beard. But of course, when people ask me, sometimes in the comments, but do you really think he had a beard? Well, here's the thing. Try and contextualize that question to any of us. If someone asks, but did Metatron or Raph have a beard? Say someone asks in the future. But the reality is it depends. In my early 30s and late 20s, I was constantly clean shaven. But then I kind of, the beard grew on me and grew on me. And so, people were telling me, no, keep the beard. And now it's just become part of me. And plus my wife likes it. So I'm like, yeah, now I do have a beard. But even the length of the beard changes throughout our lives, doesn't it? So I think some of the problems that we have when it comes to not just Jesus in this case, but historical people as well. I mean, but what would he have looked like? And then we stick to an image as if these people are two-dimensional. But these people would have had a life that was rich and different. And so, yeah, a young Jesus wouldn't have had a beard, of course. There could have been periods in his life where he did shave, and then there would have been situations in which his beard would have been longer, situations where the beard would have been shorter. Maybe it was a little hot, so he kind of trimmed it a bit, like I trimmed it yesterday, for example. I think it is important to look at historical people in our imagination and give them depth. And that's the same for length of hair. Not always the same length. Sometimes you could have had a longer hair, maybe not as long as me. Okay, I'm a little bit of an exception here, but sometimes he would have had longer hair. Maybe there would have been times in which he trimmed it a bit, particularly if he had like kind of a traveling moment, perhaps if he was traveling, perhaps if he was working. And then there is the whole situation with the pacts. Was he a Nazarite? Was he not a Nazarite? Maybe that's worthy of a dedicated video, because depending on that. But even in that case, it would only have been a period in his life where, unless it was a special pact, such as Samson in the Bible, who had a lifelong pact of never cutting his hair. But if it was a situation like the regular alliance that the Nazarites have with God, in specifically this culture, then only for a certain period of time they would have let their hair grow, and then after those years would have ended, they would have cut it and sacrificed it. Hair, beard, we should see them as something that is changing, constantly morphing as the lives of these people take shape and stride through time. But yeah, a brown or a black color for his hair and beard is what I usually imagined. Okay. Oh, and here is a little bit animated. Interesting. We've got one more video, and it's this one here. Not the greatest thumbnail, I'll say, but Lucas Kitchen. So I don't know anything about this content creator and his channel. We're gonna watch his opinion about the AI reveals what Jesus looks like. You'll be amazed. A little bit of a clickbaity title, but hey, I use them too. So with that being said, I wouldn't trust the AI to reveal anything when it comes to the looks of any person in history, including Jesus. But I don't want to strawman the man, so let's watch it.
I asked an AI bot to show me what Jesus actually looked like, and I'm going to share that odd and amazing experience with you right after this.
Okay.
Now, before we jump into what Jesus looked like and sounded like, I need to give you a quick tour of the kinds of tools we're going to be using in this video. This is me.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son.
It's me saying John 3:16, but it isn't really me, is it? Get an idea of what Jesus actually looked like and maybe sounded like. It's not surprising that if you put the word Jesus into an image-generating AI bot, this is the kind of thing that you get. Good-looking guy, right?
Right.
I mean, kind of too good-looking if you ask me. I mean, if this guy was real and I met him in, like, say, a coffee shop, I wouldn't be able to make eye contact. Eyes that are those piercing blue pools of depth and wisdom. Also, he could have, like, a night gig as a hair model. Just...
Can I have that as a hair model? Let me know in the comments.
I don't know, something doesn't feel right. It doesn't fit the reality, and I think we all kind of know it, right? So I can confidently say that in the Roman world where Jesus lived, basically no one looked like this.
In the Roman world, no one looked like this. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm not trying to attack you or anything. I'm just trying to understand your point. Blue eyes were absolutely a thing. In fact, they are mentioned for a few emperors. Definitely for the Celtic type, the Nordic type. They already existed, in fact, even in Spain. And Italian Romans, some would have had blue eyes. The long hair is absolutely a thing specifically in Roman Judea because of specific traditions and connotation as a pact or an alliance with God. So some Jews would have absolutely had long hair. Beard, very common, not only among the Jews, but also among the Romans, because this idea that Romans were all clean shaven, it's true in some cases, but there is imagery and iconography that shows even Roman soldiers with a beard, and some emperors did have a beard. And in fact, oftentimes it was a matter of if the general, the legatus, or the emperor had a beard, then plenty of people would do it to copy him. But then if he was clean-shaven, then a lot of soldiers would do that. So it varies depending on the time. Ethnicity? Well, this looks like a French guy, an Italian guy, like it looks like a European to me. Probably like a Southern European, considering the dark hair and beard.
If this guy showed up all clean, perfect hair, well-fed, with perfect complexion, people probably would have thought he was an angel. I mean, he's just too much.
Or a nobleman, or a member of, or a patrician, or a member of high society. They absolutely looked clean. A lot of people looked clean. This idea that people in ancient time and then in the medieval period, classical antiquity, were dirty is not true. People cleaned, people bathed. Bathhouses were extremely common both in the Roman period and in the Middle Ages. When you had no access to a bathhouse, you absolutely had access to rivers, and people bathed. We know that the Norse were obsessed with bathing and bathed even more than regular people of other areas of the world. The Romans were very clean. There is no reason to not believe that Jews would have been clean. And as he says, perfect complexion of skin, it depends on what you do. If you're someone who works the land, you're a farmer. If you're a soldier, then it's a different situation. But if you're someone in the upper class, absolutely. Nutrition, not a problem. So yeah, and that would have reflected onto the health of your hair, the health of your skin. So very much depends. As he's pointing out, this looks like a member of the upper echelon of society, but not something unheard of in period.
What could we change to get a little closer to what Jesus really looked like? Well, I started to change the input for the AI bot I was using. Try and find out. Instead of just telling the AI to show me Jesus, instead I began to describe what a first century man from a fishing village might appear as.
How do you base that though? Because to do that, since we are talking, there we go. What do you base that on? Because your sources need to be strong in order to give that prompt to the AI. Otherwise, you're just using your own personal speculation, which should be a fun exercise, of course. But in order for this to be coherent, then we need to use sources. So how were they described by people in period? What do we know about ethnic relocations, population census in period? What about the iconography? That would be a great way to look at how people are represented so that we can feed the AI with the correct historically accurate prompts. Because just because you say a fisherman, that your idea, just like mine, by the way, could be skewed by our own bias, selective bias and bias interpretations or expectations. Oftentimes do not match how historical things actually were.
So first, sorry, but that hair. I mean, it's great for a romance book cover, but it's so impractical for a fisherman. And that's not to mention that the first depictions of Jesus in historical art had his hair short.
Okay, a lot to unpack here. Was he a fisherman? His apostles were. I would describe him as a carpenter first, before being a fisherman. Is long hair impractical for physical jobs? Not necessarily. I speak as a long-haired man. I wear armor. I do historical reenactment, both Roman and medieval, and Japanese, in fact. Think about the samurai who had extremely long hair. Spartans, as well as we know, some of the warriors did long hair. Noblemen had long hair, but of course, such as the Merovingian kings. But in that case, you would have a point by telling me, well, yeah, but they didn't do anything because they had servants. Good point, if you were thinking that. But in general, long hair is not that impractical. It can be, but it's not prohibitive. And depending on the period and which area of the world, it was common. People kept it. Once again, my length of hair is a little unusual, unless you're like a medieval woman, I guess. But you know what I mean. But now let's discuss the second point that he brought up, which I thought was very interesting and kind of help us to discuss a little bit. As always, do keep in mind that I'm not attacking him, I'm attacking the argument, with maintaining respect for the speaker, of course. Okay, so did Jesus have his hair short in the original art? It depends on the art. Off the top of my head, there is one specific type of Roman art, key being the fact that it's Roman, that did represent Jesus performing a miracle with very short, in fact, typical, from our point of view, Roman hair-like. This is, however, being considered not because it's an accurate representation of Jesus. Most likely the artist had no idea what Jesus would have looked like. Also because when you read the Gospels, there is no one single description, not one, about Jesus's appearances. We're not told what he looked like at all. So even in period, they had no idea how to describe him when they were making iconography. But let's think about what type of purpose that iconography had: to preach to the Romans. So they made him look like a Roman. And then there is a representation of Jesus with kind of middle-length hair that is also very ancient, but that's used because they want Jesus to appear as a young Apollo. So once again, in connection to the people you're preaching to. And last but not least, the image of Jesus, which there is a lot of iconography of Jesus that is pretty ancient, of him having a long head and a beard. That tends to appear more often where the message that they want, or the aspect of Jesus that they want to reach the masses from the authorities, is not just that he is the Son of God, but that he is God. And therefore, God the Father, who is a godfather-like deity from the point of view of the Romans and the Greeks, Zeus, and so he looks more like Zeus. So there is a lot to unpack when it comes to iconography, but we really have all sorts. We don't just have Jesus with short hair, and when we do, we know why. And it's not because that was more accurate necessarily.
Also, short hair was favored and even encouraged by Jesus' apostles in the New Testament, so...
Only Paul. But then again, when it comes to Paul and his discussion about long hair and men, and I am actually preparing a dedicated video to that because it's something that I'm interested in personally for obvious reasons. But let's remember the point of view of Paul. Paul was a Jew, but he was also a Roman citizen, considering that he was born in the Roman province of Cilicia, or Cilicia. And just to give you a little visual representation, as you can see, Cilicia is this part, we could say southern part of Turkey, as opposed to Pontus, which was the northern part of Turkey. It's just a different sea that it's facing. And when he says what he says about long hair and men, he's specifically talking to the Corinthians. But yet, Jesus was a Jew. And for the Jews, long hair was specifically a matter of an alliance with God, not something that necessarily was encouraged not to do. And the apostles were also Jews before being Christians. But I won't go too deeply on this because I do want to make a dedicated video, just saying I disagree with that statement, with all due respect, of course.
It makes sense that a shorter crop would have been the dude that did the job, so to speak. Okay, so it's better, but he's supposed to be a Middle Easterner, right? So I don't think the blue eyes are gonna work. Okay, that's a little better, but still his skin is so white, right? I mean, Jesus wasn't white. You know that, right? Jesus wasn't white. I mean, he wasn't white ethnically, but also people of his time were basically outside under the sun all the time, so his skin would be a pretty dark complexion.
Also, let's remember, Jesus did not care about appearances. That is one of the main things. He doesn't care about what you wear. He says that and makes it very clear. And so, for someone who didn't care about outward appearances and mostly cared about your inner soul, do you think he would have cared about the fashion? Even if this was the case, oh no, I need to cut my hair short because... No, I don't think so. Well, here's the thing. When you say Middle Eastern, Jesus was Semitic. Semitic, yes, Middle Eastern people are Semitic, but when you say Semitic, you can mean Arabs, you can mean Phoenicians, so Punic, you can mean the Jews, of course, you can mean Akkadian. So there is a lot of phenotypic variance within the Semitic type, aka Middle Eastern people. So was he white? Well, he was an Anglo-Saxon, but the types of skin tones that you have within Semitic populations varies tremendously. Some have very fair skin, Some have an olive complexion, and others, we could say, are brown. And there is quite a lot of variety with the eyes too, and this would have happened in period as well. So I have this idea that when you think Middle Eastern, you're specifically focusing on one single phenotypic trait, even though we know for a fact that Semitic people have a very wide phenotypic variance within their gene pool. I mean, fair, he would have been tanned, and that's why I agree. I think he would have been tanned due to his job and his very active life for what we know, because once again, there is a good 20 years that we don't know anything about.
For that matter, his features would be much more Eastern Mediterranean. And in addition, he would look older than the modern 33-year-old. And that's because we spend a lot of time inside, not under the sun. But being constantly sunbaked has that effect on your epidermis. So...
Gosh, but that's not, I mean, you exaggerated a little bit. Now, I get it. He may have looked more mature than a mod, because I mean, today, let's be honest, a 33-year-old of today looks like a 23-year-old of like my parents' generation. At least that's the kind of feel that I get visually. But this looks like a 53-year-old. So you gave him 20 years, mate. That's a bit exaggerated.
That feels more accurate. I think we're getting there, but we're still not quite there yet. Now, I know this might be a bit of a shock, but balding among Jewish men has a tendency to set in a little younger than some other ethnic populations. It's researched. You can look it up. So I'm not saying that Jesus was bald for sure, but by 33, it's reasonable to think that Jesus might have had some male pattern baldness setting in. Now, here's the kicker, and I know this is going to be difficult for some of you guys to see, but let's just pause.
Yeah, but this is like complete speculation. I mean, maybe there is a message after all this. Since you're a Christian channel, imagine you're going to tell me it doesn't matter what he looked like. It's about his sacrifice. That's my guess. I could be completely wrong. That's my guess. I mean, what's the point? If he was balding this much, this severely, right? When we have the episode of Judas' kiss, why did he even kiss? He could have told the Romans, oh, it's the balding guy.
The video and let's have him smile. Okay. Yeah, so look at those great teeth. I mean, those are great teeth even in the modern world. And I hate to do it, but those aren't pre-dynasty ancient agrarian culture teeth. That's just not how they looked. So this would probably be more accurate to a first century mouth. Let's talk about Jesus' voice. In the movies, he always has this thick, buttery British accent.
He does, doesn't it? He's right.
To give you an example, let's go back to hair model Jesus we had at the beginning to see what that might have sounded like.
Hair model.
God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him
Beautiful,
shall...
right? I mean, I love it. I love a good British accent, but
it depends on which one you give. Could you imagine Jesus with a Cockney accent? All right there, if God so loved the world, no, I won't. Yeah, he's a little RP, usually. Received pronunciation, I suppose.
now let's try to get something a little closer to reality.
כי התבורה נתונה ביד משה, וחסד ואמת ממקור ישוע המשיח יצאו.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, sure. And obviously, he wouldn't be speaking English. And I find Hebrew to be a beautifully sounding language, by the way. I like it a lot.
Did you know that there is actually a verse that talks about Jesus' appearance? Isaiah said, from God's perspective, talking about Jesus, "My servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot, like a root in dry ground." Notice this part. He says, there was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. I think that's pretty good. There's a point.
There is one difference, though. That period, the R in the accent that they would have had would have been trailed a little bit, like in Italian or in Spanish, like a R. Whereas modern Jews tend to have a R, like in a French accent, if you will. That probably wasn't period. Yeah, I think what this means is that, yeah, as you say, it wouldn't have been like a model. If this was the real Jesus, like you are creating it, rather than saying, well, there was nothing majestic about him, I think they would have said he looked really ugly, and yet he was so amazing. So I think you went the opposite side. So sure, let's not make him like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise, or like a really good looking, beautiful model, but at the same time, I think it's also as wrong to make him ugly. He was like average looking, so there was nothing that would make him stand out. That's how I interpret the passage. This passage is talking, it could be referring to his attire as well. Someone who is very well dressed can appear beautiful and majestic. So it may be talking about that. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because then when it comes to appearance, Jesus does specifically talk against those who wear very expensive clothing and show off. So maybe it was a reference to that. I know some people use this verse to say, so he would have been ugly. I think that's wrong. It's a wrong interpretation.
He was despised and rejected, a
That is because of what he taught.
man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. The Apostle Paul once wrote, Jesus was in very nature God, but did not consider equality with God something to be used in his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness.
Yeah, and that does not mean that it would have been unattractive or ugly. Absolutely not. It's saying what a massive difference you have between a divine nature and a human nature. That's what he's saying in there. And in this case, he was explaining it for those people that, for example, who were used to the ancient Greek idea of gods and the ancient Roman idea of gods, when instead a god would have been, wow, looking like a freaking bodybuilder with beautiful, credible body. I mean, but talking about the body, one more thing that I see lacking in your recreation is that he would have been a carpenter, so you should have made him a little strong. You should have had some muscle on him, not, once again, like a bodybuilder, but this guy looks malnourished and looks like someone who didn't have the ability to work as a carpenter and travel a lot and be with fishermen and fish with them and all the activities that were very physical that we know Jesus did.
So when Jesus arrived, he had abandoned his godly appearance, and he looked like an average man.
Yeah, and that can be juxtaposed to when he regains his godly appearance, which is its description after resurrection in the book of Revelation, when he has eyes of fire, white blazing countenance, feet of bronze. That's the comparison. It's not a ugly versus beauty comparison. I mean, according to me, of course, you're more than welcome to agree with him.
Of that age. So I have a question for you.
Please.
Would you have believed in Jesus if he appeared in this form? If he looked like this? A few years ago, a man accused me of only believing in Jesus because I thought, supposedly, that Jesus was a white man. I had to correct him. I said something like the following. I said, Jesus wasn't white. He was a dark-skinned Middle Easterner.
Well, you don't know if he was dark-skinned. He was a Semitic man, Jewish origin. That's all we know. So you're making it as a statement of fact, and we don't know that, do we? Considering the aforementioned phenotypic variation within the Semitic type. He may have been dark-skinned, he may have been olive-skinned, he may have been lightly olive-skinned, dark olive, light olive, brownish, or fair-skinned. No way to know.
But he could be purple for all I care.
I appreciate that, I agree.
I don't believe in Jesus because of his skin color.
Yep.
I've believed in him, and I follow him now because I'm convinced he was the Son of God.
Amen.
The one who gives eternal life to those who believe in him.
That's the message, okay?
See, everyone has a different mental image of Jesus, but I hope that we can keep the main thing the main thing.
Okay.
Jesus offers you and me eternal life the moment we believe in him for that free gift. We don't believe in him for appearances. We believe in him because he proved by his resurrection that he can give us everlasting life with him.
Okay, yeah, well, I appreciate, of course, and approve the message, so I kind of had anticipated that. Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate that it was a fun exercise, regardless of a few points of disagreement. But once again, much respect for the creator, not a problem at all. And when I started it, I had no idea. I saw that he said Christian a little bit afterwards here, but when I first started it, I thought it was going to be an atheist channel due to the image, because usually those are the ones that they use this kind of thing. But I would have respected him all the same, because at the end of the day, it's fun to have a little bit of a discussion, and he did present some interesting points. It's just that I disagreed with quite a few. It is what it is. I hope that Lucas doesn't mind. And if you like his content, absolutely check him out. So thank you very much, noble ones. I think we've seen quite a few interesting videos on this topic today, and I'm just going to jump on a different project of mine tomorrow that I would like to post. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.